Here's the thing about HOAs. Once they write a rule, they cling to it like it's scripture. Marianne Cross had lived in her quiet cul-de-sac for nearly a decade, paying every fee, attending every meeting, doing her part. Behind her house ran a small drainage channel the HOA called the Dead End Declaration, a community-maintained waterway that everyone was charged monthly rent for. The thing barely worked. Each rainy season it overflowed, flooding backyards and carrying the stench of neglect. Marianne complained for years, emails, letters, even photos. But nothing changed. So one day, tired of paying for a service that never worked, she simply stopped. A few months later, her health declined, and she passed away quietly in that same home. When her daughter, Evelyn Cross, came to sort through her mother's papers, she found the expected bills, property documents, old HOA notices, and one thing that made her stomach drop, a letter marked Notice of Legal Action. It was from Richard Hale, the HOA's landlord and self-appointed enforcer, claiming that Marianne still owed months of unpaid channel rent. Evelyn laughed at first. "You can't sue someone who's dead," she muttered. But Richard Hale wasn't joking. The HOA had filed an actual lawsuit against Marianne S. estate for failing to pay maintenance fees on the Dead End Declaration channel. According to the HOA declaration, the responsibility for the fees extends to heirs and successors unless formally terminated. Evelyn thought it was absurd. Her mother's house had flooded twice in the last year, and the HOA never lifted a finger to fix the drainage. Yet here they were, demanding payment from a woman buried 6 feet under. When she called Richard to reason with him, he responded coldly. "Death doesn't erase debt, Miss Cross. The property still benefits from the channel." Evelyn replied, "Benefits? That channel nearly drowned her garden." But he didn't care. The HOA had its rules, and Richard had the arrogance of a man who thought he was the law. So Evelyn hired a lawyer. Together they combed through years of her mother's correspondence, emails showing unanswered maintenance requests, photos of overflowing water, even videos neighbors had taken during storms. The more they dug, the clearer it became. The HOA had collected thousands over the years, but barely maintained the drainage. The Dead End Declaration wasn't just a name, it was a description of how the system actually worked. Her lawyer, a calm, sharp woman named Dana Morris, knew they could fight this. If they failed to maintain, they breached their end of the contract, she said. No one, dead or alive, owes money for services never rendered. When the day of the hearing came, Evelyn found herself sitting across from Richard Hale in a small courtroom filled with HOA board members and neighbors, pretending not to stare. Richard looked smug, flipping through his file as if victory was already his. But Dana came armed with evidence. She laid it all out before the judge. Photos of the filthy channel, proof of unreturned calls, HOA reports showing no maintenance for over 2 years. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "the HOA is suing a deceased woman for failing to pay rent on a broken system they never repaired. The law may bind contracts, but it doesn't reward negligence." Richard's lawyer countered with cold logic. The declaration, he argued, was legally binding. "Maintenance fees are collective obligations, not performance-based," he said. "The estate inherited both property and liability." But the judge wasn't buying the simplicity. He flipped through the photos, frowning as he studied the images of standing water and rusted drains. "Mr. Hale," he said finally, "if the HOA failed its duty of upkeep, it can't claim full payment for non-existent maintenance." The courtroom fell silent. The judge ruled partially in Evelyn S.'s favor. The estate would not owe future payments until the HOA restored the channel to proper condition. Past dues would be reduced to account for the HOA's failure, and the HOA was ordered to cover legal costs for the estate. Richard's face went pale. He'd come expecting to humiliate a grieving daughter, but instead, he left with a public reprimand. Evelyn walked out of the courtroom with a bittersweet smile. Justice, though partial, had been served. Later that evening, she sat in her mother's old living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of a house finally at peace. "This wasn't about the money," she whispered. "It was about respect." The irony wasn't lost on her. An HOA that prided itself on order and community had tried to drain the last drop of dignity from a dead woman, only to drown in its own greed. The dead-end declaration channel finally got cleaned the next spring, not because the HOA cared, but because the judge made them. The lawsuit became a local cautionary tale, proof that some HOA battles go too far, that bureaucracy without compassion becomes cruelty. And as Evelyn looked out the window toward that narrow, now clear channel, she could almost hear her mother's voice carried softly on the water. "Stand your ground, kid, even when they think you can't fight back."